My name is Jess Ngo. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Scaling Up Youth Employment Working Group, along with my colleagues Liz Vance and Hisham Jabi, who's also one of our speakers today. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you joining. As you know, this session is being organized as part of the 7th annual workshop of the Global Community of Practice on Scaling Development Outcomes. The community has over 2,500 members, and if you are not yet a member, a special welcome to you and open invitation to join us. The community is completely voluntary and free of charge to join, but of course, we're only as strong as our members. Each new voice really does make us stronger, so we really invite you to join the scaling community. The community is dedicated to advancing and professionalizing the practice of scaling by learning across sectors, geographies, and perspectives. In addition to this annual workshop that's taking place now, the community issues quarterly newsletters, we produce knowledge products, and we also have 9 working groups, including the Youth Employment Working Group, to explore scaling through these different thematic lenses and sectors. Each of the working groups hold quarterly virtual meetings, and you can find a dedicated website or web page for each of them on the community website. The address for the website, which will pop in the chat, is www.scalingcommunityofpractice.com. And if you ever have any questions or want to learn more, please feel free to send us an email at info@scalingcop.org. So before we jump into today's exciting session, I just want to go over a few housekeeping remarks. First, the session is being recorded. We ask that you also please mute your microphone and turn your camera off if you're not speaking. And if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat at any time. We've left plenty of time for Q&A. But if you have any questions throughout, please go ahead and put them in the chat. So I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for today's session on Beyond Digital Training Delivery, Digital Disruption, and Youth Economic Opportunities. Our first speaker is Hisham Jabi, founder and CEO of Paltech US. He has over 30 years of experience in managing digital transformation and entrepreneurship in the MENA region and globally. He founded Mapco, one of the largest IT firms in the Middle East, and the Palestinian Information Technology Association, also known as PITA. He also founded Jusur, an NGO in California that provided youth in the Middle East with access to capital and entrepreneurship training, and designed and directed the USAID Ruwad program, one of the largest USAID-funded programs in the Middle East to provide youth with entrepreneurship training and employability skills. He is currently working as a senior advisor for multinational donors, including the World Bank, the ILO, UN Ops, and USAID, and is a seasoned chief of party with experience working in complex conflict and post-conflict settings, and he was also a President Clinton Scholar. Hisham received an MBA and master's degree in information technology with an emphasis on artificial intelligence and knowledge management from the Drucker School of Management at Claremont Graduate University in California. Our second speaker is Rebeca de la Vega. She is the regional manager for Cisco Networking Academy in Latin America, where she oversees development and implementation of strategies that seek to multiply the impact of the Cisco Networking Academy. The Cisco Networking Academy in Latin America and the Caribbean is in 30 countries, benefiting over 900,000 students a year. And this is really made possible through strong collaboration with governments, private and public educational institutions, and nonprofit organizations. Prior to Cisco, Rebeca held roles with different federal agencies in Mexico, leading social communication areas as well as policy and regulation formulation. She also held roles in the private sector and served as a university professor. She holds a master's in business administration with a marketing specialty and a bachelor's in communication from the Instituto Tecnológico de Estudios Superiores de Monterrey, as well as additional studies in public administration from the Institute for Public Administration in Mexico. So very excited to have two esteemed speakers with us today. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our first speaker.
So I'll just put my camera on to say hello. I will put it off because I have bandwidth issues today. So maybe you can hear me better if I put my camera off. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about the digital economy and what enormous opportunity this represents for the job. So let me give some background first on what the digital economy is and what it means for us and for young people. So if you can, please move to the next one. So with the pandemic, the world changed forever. And what we know is that the future is uncertain. And the world continues to move very, very fast and to change at a very fast pace. Next, please. So what happened with the pandemics, and we all experience this, is that businesses are adopting a digital first model. And we are not only talking about big corporations, we are talking about all kinds of businesses, even the small ones. I can tell you my experience here in Mexico, where I go to a small town, and even in small, very small stores and shops are going into digital, even at a very basic level using WhatsApp. But that means we are going into that direction and it won't go back. Next, please. And we look this in all spaces of our living. Let's look at this data. 75% of companies in the US only plan on accelerating their technology transformation just as a result of the pandemic. 75%. Next one, please. And if we look at what this means for employees, 88% of organizations worldwide encourage their employees to work from home because of the pandemic. And even we are seeing that employees are going back to the offices. We are seeing that this is not going back to previous of the pandemic. We are going into a hybrid mode where we will have in a meeting people in person, but also some of our employees joining from home. And this means a lot of changes in technology. Next, please. Also in education, let's look at this figure. 1.2 billion children moved to hybrid learning in a matter of weeks. And we talk about hybrid learning for many years, but what we saw in the pandemic is that we were not prepared. We were not prepared with the technology. We were not prepared with the pedagogy. So it has meant a lot of changes in a very fast way. Next, please. So governments around the world met and legislated virtually. This was a total change. If we look at governments, they even were reluctant to meet virtually, and now they have to legislate this way. Next, please. Medicine. If we look at telehealth, only in a small period, let's take January to June 2020, the adoption increased 50%. So doctors who used to think that technology sometimes was not for them, now they have to get into this virtual world. And we have to look at not only how to use the telehealth, but how to keep security so that the data from the patients are safe and get privacy. Next, please. So let's look at technology. In the next 3 years, it is expected that 5 million new apps will be written, almost all of them for the digital world. But let's think what 5 million new apps mean, not only in terms of coding, but in terms of infrastructure. Let's ask the question, who is going to be behind these apps? Not only, again, designing the apps, but in the infrastructure that is supporting the business that this new app enables. Next, please. So businesses must transform their infrastructure. They have to think about new infrastructure to keep the people safe, the employees working, and they have to adopt not only the technology, but the processes. Next, please. Businesses also need to think about security, because with the pandemic and all of us going into the digital world, while security threats increased in a very severe way. Next, please. So the opportunity to drive value with this digital transformation has never been greater. A lot of businesses disappear with the pandemic, but new ones appear. So the opportunity to drive value has never been greater. Next, please. So in the midst of this pandemic, the lack of resources, the advances in technology, artificial intelligence, growing complexity, the question for all of us is, are we ready for the digital economy? Are we ready with the people that will really support these corporations? Next one, please. So the question remains, who can organizations count on to help them take advantage of this massive opportunity? It's not only the technology, it's the innovation behind it, but it's the right skills to put these organizations to work. Who is going to design, maintain, install this technology? Who will drive adoption? Who will really enable this technology to serve the purpose of the business? Next, please. So the answer is skills. We need a skilled workforce. And let's look at these data from the Future of Jobs published by the World Economic Forum. It is expected that by 2025, 85 million jobs will disappear by a shift in labor between humans and machines. And this figure always raises a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty. But if we look at the other side of the coin, how many new jobs will be created by this digital transformation? So it is expected by 2025, 97 million new jobs will be created. But this will be totally different jobs with totally different skills that will be needed to take an advantage of these jobs. Next, please. So education and are key. There is no question. I don't think anyone in this room will question this. So probably the doubt is what will be the skills that will remain relevant in the next years. Next, please. So let's talk about digital skills. Next, please. And the challenges. Again, more data, just to set the context. And this data has always struck me. 50%, this was published by the World Economic Forum as well. And it says that 50% of the knowledge acquired during the first year of college will be outdated by graduation. So we have to really think about what we are teaching the young people so that they can remain relevant when they finish their 5-year education. Other skills are becoming increasingly important: adaptability, advanced cognitive, social behavioral, and success in the future will belong to those who really can work with the machines. Next, please. And just to set another important, I will not go into this, but just one very important, looking at the fast pace of these changes, skills development for the changing of this fast pace is a matter of lifelong learning. So we have to teach technology, we have to teach advanced cognitive skills, but also this concept of it is not a matter of 5 years, it is a matter of learning throughout the whole life. Next, please. So again, the challenge is how to build the capacity for resilience, how to build this human capital that will be able to formulate new knowledge. And I love this quote from this futurist and education speaker that says that we have the opportunity to reach a lot new parts of the world, to tap into talent, regardless the geographic boundaries, and provide education to the world that didn't have these options before, to really create an inclusive future for all, because technology can enable this to really develop, building the capacity in parts that didn't think that they can receive this level of education. Next, please. So if we think about the skills that are required, because when we look at the figures that I mentioned, we don't know what the jobs of the future are, but we might have an idea of what the skills are. So we need, if we put them into buckets, we need specialized skills, we need broad skills, we need entrepreneur skills, of course, and human skills. Specialized skills, software develop, analytics, IoT, networking. There is no digital economy without the network. Security, I will mention more about security because it's it's a key and fundamental, and it's becoming a threat. And of course, data. Broad skills, business operations, product and product management, entrepreneurial skills, business acumen, critical thinking, design thinking, this mindset of a diversity, and human skills, what I mentioned before, negotiation, persuasion, social perceptiveness, creativity. Next, please. So in this digital world, we at Cisco created a couple of years ago a way to understand where to put our efforts in terms of intervention. How can we understand what country we should put our effort in? So we created this digital readiness. I invite you all to go a little bit to explore this, and we created a score to identify which level of readiness that each country was. And we took into consideration these buckets: basic needs, business and government investment, ease of doing business, human capital, startup environment, technology adoption, and technology infrastructure. Because digital readiness is not only about infrastructure. Who, again, what is the talent that will be able to create, but also to design and install and maintain this technology that is needed in this rapid space? So this is something that is useful for us to understand what is the level of interventions that we have to do. I invite you all, I will put the link in the chat so that you can have a chance to really explore, and you can dig into each country and understand and have a better understanding of what level of readiness each country has. Next, please. And this helps us again with job creation. If we provide the right skills, we can be able to create an opportunity for the young people. So in terms of skills, there is a shortage. In software engineer, it is growing 3 times the average, and it is expected to do that until 2026. Of course, it is expected that 60% of the jobs will need some basic or advanced programming. Connected technologies are growing. CIOs, that is the technology people at companies, are planning to deploy advanced network solutions. As I said, that digital economy is based in the network. But look at this last figure: cybersecurity jobs growing 31% by 2029, 7 times the average. Here there is a challenge, but it's also a great opportunity. When I talk to governments, they always tend to think about programming as the key skill to provide. And it's important, of course it is important. But if we look at other skills that will be needed, it's not only programming, it's networking, it's cybersecurity, it's infrastructure. Next, please. So if we think about, next, please. Again, networking skills, security skills, but cybersecurity, as I said, I wanted to dig into that because it is becoming a very important business. Oh, we tend to think as a threat, but it is a business for someone. And it is targeting IT infrastructure, but now it's targeting as well operation technology. And this impacts human lives. When this targets a bank, when this targets a hospital, we're talking about human lives. Next, please. So every location, I said before that we have hybrid work, that 80% of the people were forced to move home to do home office. And every location and every method used by an employee to work is a hole in your life raft. It's an exposure in terms of threat. So this implies more complexity for the IT teams. It implies more complexity for businesses, small or big. Next, please. So cybersecurity is crucial, and it's, as I said, a very important business for some people. Billions around the world depend on the internet to be reliable, resilient, and safe, and we need talent. Next, please. It's a top critical talent that it's going to be in the next 2 years, and I think far beyond. And the World Economic Forum also has named this as a global risk. So it affects all parts of a lot of areas: extreme weather, livelihood crisis, climate action failure. Those are risks as well, but cybersecurity is compared to these risks as well. Next, please. The network without security is irrelevant. The network needs people that keep this, keep it safe. Next, please. I'm not going to put the video. I'm going to. Thank you. The most important part is, let's look at the skills gap. 3.5 million undersupply of cybersecurity professionals. A huge opportunity for our young people to discover a profession that not only has an opportunity of economic development, but impacts people's lives, impact a community, impact a country. There is a skills gap that we have to address together. Next, please. So the job opportunities are everywhere. It is not limited to tech companies, because there is a feeling that tech is for tech companies. So there is a huge demand growing in healthcare, in transportation, energy, food, smart cities. And let's look at this data. In 2018, 89% of online IT job openings were in non-tech companies. So there's a huge opportunity to make a difference across all sectors. 65% of IT job growth outside the tech sector jumped up to 65% from 2013 to 2018. So again, job opportunities are everywhere. Cybersecurity jobs, as well as other technical jobs, are not limited to tech companies. All organizations, big and small, need protection. And we need to have also protection for citizens as well, because all citizens, we are moving in a cyber world. Next, please. So closing the gap, there's no one company, there's no one government, there's no one organization that can do it alone. It starts from the top with the leaders. We have to educate together the next generation of skilled workforce, and we have to create network, data, and cybersecurity awareness for all, because this is what the digital world is about. Next, please. So we have a model, and I'm just going to go through this very quickly. This is just an example of what we do with this. We provide ecosystem, platform, curriculum. We have an ecosystem of academies. But even if you don't, we are not alone in this space. There are other industry companies that are providing content. And this is an opportunity to close the gap as well with institutions, because sometimes institutions, as I said, before what the data that the World Economic Forum shared about how irrelevant could be what the student is learning when he goes out of college. We can close the gap if we continue to provide content and we continue to partner together to deliver updated content to students. But this again is not something that we can do alone. We need partners, and we should partner industry, academia, government organizations. But the most important thing here is that we should meet the learner where they are in the learning journeys. What we learned with this pandemic is that there were many young people leaving schools for many reasons. So it's not only through the schools, through the education and formal sector. We need to enable technology for students to learn where they are, where free education and a high level of quality education, so that we can really provide them with skills. It's not only letting them understand, it's acquiring the skills that will enable them to get a job the next day they finish their studies. Next, please. So this is just, as I said, an example. We have, we can help, but there are others. The most important thing is to learn about the skills. Next, please. And the most important thing is skills to jobs. Why a high quality education is needed, of course, but why skills to job paths are important. And that is the important thing. We have to understand the job ready skills for roles like cybersecurity, for networking. And as I said, programming continues to be important, but we have to think more broadly. Next, please. As I said, we have skills to job curriculum, but the important thing is to look at the buckets: networking, programmable infrastructure, cybersecurity, programming, operational systems, and IT. And the most important part, practice, interactive tools, experiences. And as I said, this is not only us that are doing this. We should work together because we cannot do it alone. Other companies are doing the same, and academia must take advantage of this so that we can shorten the gap that is produced when someone finishes school and wants to enter the job market. The job market has changed, and it will continue to change in a very important way in the following years, as I mentioned. Next, please. So my final message to you will be, let's work together to equip young people with knowledge and skills to understand data. It is very important that there is also an understanding how to, we have millions of sensors around the world in IoT. So how does we translate that information coming from the sensors so that it's in actionable information to make decisions regarding the business? To harness let's work together to equip young people with digital skills that will prepare them for this digital future that is happening now. This is just an example of a student that we have, but again, it's a partnership more than ever. Academia, governments, organization, we must work together to equip these young people, to provide them with the opportunity to learn these skills so that they can really get a significant job that could benefit them, the student, their families, the economy of a nation and the economy of a world. Latin America or the Americas is in the need of a lot of help, and we should work together to provide the people with these skills. And with this, I think this was my last slide. I'm open to questions that you may have. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that we can still work together to equip our students and our young people in the future.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I think we'll hold questions till after the second presentation, but certainly we've had a couple come in and we're monitoring those, so we'll have them ready once we start Q&A. And again, please feel free to continue populating questions in the chat. So I will pass it on to our second speaker, Hisham. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me, Jess?
Yes, we can hear and see you. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize to everybody for the technical glitch. My name is Hisham Jabi. Thank you for the introduction, Jess, and thank you, Rebecca, for the wonderful presentation. I appreciate the leadership of Johannes and Larry on this. Yesterday, we heard about technology as a game changer. And today, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience working as a consultant at the Chief Economist Office at the World Bank for the Middle East and North Africa to help the team to produce a comprehensive report on jobs in the Middle East and North Africa. And I just want to point out that this is a perspective from donor perspective, how they look at the issue of technology and boosting job creation. But the report was not per se about technology. It's about how to create jobs at scale in the Middle East and North Africa. I just want also to clarify that I do not represent the World Bank in this presentation, but I am a consultant and I was part of the team, and I'm just sharing with you all my learning out of the 2 years of work with my colleague at the World Bank. Next, please. This is actually the outline. I mean, the scope of the work, the scope of the problem is the problem in the Middle East and North Africa in terms of youth unemployment. I'm going to talk about what was the scope of the report, because, you know, the World Bank by its nature focus on the quantitative perspective and analysis. However, this report was unique because they brought me to work on case studies. So there is some combination between quantitative and qualitative. And I will talk about the approach to understand how, from the cases I studied and the countries I looked at, how does technology help boost entrepreneurship as a means to self-employment. And also, I will share with you a few key learning during that journey on how technology, in a way or another, it is actually game changer, but it is not really the answer for all the problems in the Middle East and North Africa, because we all know that usually, historically, either the government scale up youth employment programs or the private sector. Of course, sometimes there are occasions where non-for-profit step in where there is a fragility and take the leadership. So in terms of private sector, you know, with the systematic structure of problems among all the political economies in the Middle East, I will talk about it later. It's very hard to really create jobs at scale by government. I mean, they're trying, but they have a bigger problem. So my perspective today is to look at what could technology really do to help young entrepreneurs enter the market quickly, test ideas, and scale it up. And I will give you like few examples of what I learned, and it's a concrete case study. Next, please. I mean, as I said, the scope of the problem is huge in the Middle East and North Africa. You're talking about like half of the population, we call it youth bulge, is below the age of 30. It's really challenging for governments, private sector, or even donors to really to start thinking about the magnitude of the problem in the Middle East and North Africa, where I come from. You know, when you have almost 30% of the young people in the Middle East, North Africa, neither in education or employment or training, that's a very, very serious challenge. And we all know that the Arab Spring started with somebody in Tunisia who is seeking job with dignity. And that's the word I hear from young people across the Middle East. They're not really looking for sweeping the streets and finding only a job. They want also engagement, and they want their voices to be heard. So that the report I was part of, done by the World Bank, really look at the comprehensive perspective of the MENA. But youth unemployment, I mean, this is destabilizing factor. When you have 26% of young people between 15 and 24, I think that's the range World Bank use. 26% are unemployed. That's really very, 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 very disturbing numbers, unfortunately. The challenge also, most of the employment happening in the informal sectors. Imagine in Morocco, you're talking about 77% of the employment, youth employment, basically happening in the informal sector. And you know, I want just to point out, the report is, of course, we have a link to the report, but the name of the game until this point is trust, public trust. There is no public trust. And that's why I think that the case study highlighted how the persona of entrepreneurs think when they want to start their business in the Middle East and North Africa and create jobs. I will talk about it in a minute. The biggest really aha moment for me personally, working with my colleague at the World Bank, is the women participation. I mean, you have a lot of women going to undergrad and even grad, and I call it, unfortunately, deferred marriage approach. And they just want to have a way out of the social norms of, you know, you have to really go through certain stages in your life. So the report look at the macro level regulation and policies, and I came with voices of young people to talk about how these policies, lack of these policies, impact them when they start business. Next, please. Can everybody hear me? Is the voice okay?
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks, Hisham.
I just want to test giving the initial challenge. I mean, this is the report. You have the link to the report. And I looked at the process was very extensive because we have to look at the sectors. We have to look at to define what does it mean to look at entrepreneurs, and from growth perspective, number of employees, potential growth, where they work. And the case study is a science by itself. So you have to really have a framework, and that framework need to be comparable to a certain extent. However, the purpose of my colleague brought me in to really not to do a comparable case studies, but rather just link certain messages that came out of their analysis in the report with the voices of young people. So that's really fascinating because it just bring context to the report, and that's I think to the best of my knowledge, that was a new. I mean, probably there was many other case study in many of the World Bank report, but it sounds to me that the way they did it this time was great. So the countries that we looked at are Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Bahrain, Morocco, Jordan, West Bank, Gaza, and Lebanon. Sector we examined or we included is education and health and delivery and supply chain and manufacturing. It's fascinating to hear people yesterday talking about what they learned from different working group and different sectors. And you wonder what are the key components that are actually common among different sectors. To me, two of them, and I will share later the learning. First is how to design innovation that can deliver at scale. where there are many pieces that you can put them together, but the delivery at scale is smooth and with less complexity. And second is the cost per participant. So these are the two. Next, please. So what the approach we use is I used human-centered design. So the issue here, I learned from best practices in this field. The idea is really not to be dragged too much in the business side of entrepreneurship and how does technology impact that, but also on the psychological side. And how does that women entrepreneur in Morocco, for example, wanted to start a business, and there are certain regulation or rules that prevent her or supported her. That's really the idea from using the human-centered design. So you put young entrepreneurs in the center, and you understand carefully the persona of these people. So I had to scan many young people, and I used the approach of nomination. So I had people who are trustworthy in the country. I outreach to them, and they nominate and write essays about these young people, because we wanted to really make sure that there is inclusion and diversity in the 7 cases. The most important thing is to really focus on how does the technology impact entry to the market and exit to the market. Many people think that's a simple issue. It is not. It is actually core issue for entrepreneurs, and I will talk about it later in much more depth. Again, the issue it was, and in this report and this exercise, is to link entrepreneurial experience, personal experience, with the macro level regulation and policies, and how does these regulation and policies impact young people. For example, gender law, labor market regulation, the issue of access to technology is one major issue. And again, the core of the report is not technology per se, but the issue here is how to put young people at level of the playing field, at level of a playing field with state-owned enterprises, and how to really help them to access market and scale up. Next, please. And these are the key, I won't spend that long time, but a couple of takeaway from my own experience and observation. First of all, on the right side, there is famous Michael Porter framework, which we all studied and are familiar with. And it's fascinating, really. I mean, in one issue, I derived talking to these young people, but because to get 7 case study, you have to really talk to 70 people to get to 7. So doing all this key informant interview and discussion, I think that technology helped to reduce the sunk cost. Very, very critical. Sunk cost is a major problem for young people, and the most important thing is that sense of shame of failure. So these two aspects, actually technology helping people, from what I heard, that to address. The issue also about scalability, because what I found working with these young people, that there is a virtual world, where young people in Egypt talking to young people in Saudi Arabia and in Jordan, sharing tons of knowledge through WhatsApp and other means that I didn't know about, really. Only I discovered when I started this work. It's like a really virtual world. And I really love the echo yesterday, that it's like a more of organic, grassroots movement where young people share information and knowledge about livelihood. So that's another observation. The access to talent remotely was critical. You see somebody like hiring Lebanese talented engineers while they are in United Arab Emirates. And the logistic in the Middle East and security is difficult. So it is probably the region that will make the best out of that remote training and remote hiring more than any other part of the world, given the difficulty in the movement. The most important thing also I noticed, and that the essence of the report, is the issue of political economy. State-owned enterprises I mean, there are people in Tunisia telling, oh, this sector I will never even think about immediately. I say, why? I say, oh, that's taken. Taken by who? By the government. So that issue of political economy and how does the technology really break that really fear into getting more innovation into certain area is a huge to really for young people. Seed funding is a major issue. The case in Bahrain is a wonderful. There's a huge emphasis in Bahrain. Bahrain is becoming the hub in the Middle East for fintech. So fintech is really targeting young people who are poor, but they need like access to seed funding, and that is very, very highly growing. One young person told me in I think Egypt that we are like 10 times faster than the government. We are actually putting the agenda for the regulation. The government is not catching up in terms of what we are doing in terms of fintech. Of course, we all know that technology helped these young people in terms of operation and management. But one thing is fascinating to me, that concept I heard yesterday on the eco model and the education model is these young people create community first through social media, then they present their product and services. Really, it's just they create a community that has, I call it, change the conventional marketing approach. Morocco, there's a guy called Hisham who started he carries my name, started something called Pip Yalla, which is a carpool model. It's not like Uber, no. It's like anybody who has a car going from point A to point B can go to the app and ask if anybody wants to ride with them, and both of the driver, and it's a very unique model. And he started with 400,000 Facebook before even he makes a penny, like before he breaks even. So that concept of course, Patagonia, we all familiar with Patagonia, use that. I call it community-based, purpose-driven marketing. That is very powerful. We never heard of that before. Young people are more into that than ever. And finally, the next slide is, I will highlight on a couple of cases very, very quickly. They're all in the report. I don't have to repeat. In Jordan, when COVID hit, a young person said, oh, I need to take all the Jordanian curricula from K to 12 and digitalize it. Put it online. And he started with like it's an idea. And the government heard about it, and they created public-private partnership. So this entrepreneur came at the right time, at the right context, with the right resources, and he started with 100,000 registered, and he had 1 million benefited. And his last time I talked to him, his goal is 10 million over the coming 5 years. 10 million user of the official curricula in the Middle East. So he's gonna go and have branches in all countries. Last time I talked to him, he raised $13 million. If I'm not mistaken, because when we finish the case study, we cannot continue talking to them. In Morocco, the guy who did the Bib Yalla, the share like ride, I think he created Facebook with 400,000 user. He said the trust is critical because women and young people and family use his platform because of trust. It's a big problem if a certain driver does. So that enforcement, social behavior enforcement, was part of the DNA of that model in Morocco. In Egypt, a cancer survivor from Dimyat, woman, 26 years old, she had a lot of struggle to find medicine because in Egypt they don't have CVS or Walgreens, or they have like thousands of small pharmacies. So she said, oh, wait a minute, I see all these people struggling. Why don't I just start an app? And this app started to really connect people looking for medicine with pharmacies. And she added the delivery. She added community of practice around wellness and health. And guess now, I think last time I talked to her, she has 250,000 users between 2018 and 2020. And she's talking about like expanding across the Middle East. So these are example on models how young people are really making a difference, changing their community and staying positive and leveraging technology to really make their destiny in take their destiny in their hands. Thank you so much. Happy to answer any question.
Thank you so much, Hisham. Fantastic presentation. And I see Rebecca has already responded to some questions in the chat. So I'll just invite others if it's a smaller quorum today. If you'd like to raise your hand or pop a question in the chat, you can certainly start with Q&A. And maybe I'll kick us off with a question for both. Hisham, you talked about jobs with dignity, and Rebecca talked about, a lot of jobs coming up in the cybersecurity market. Do these, do the jobs that youth want or that they aspire to, does it match the current jobs available? Is there a larger, mismatch between job availability and what youth are actually interested in building a career in? So I'll address that to both of you. Thank you.
Happy to really comment. I think there is a very concerning trend that happened last maybe 2 years, that private sector is much more interested in skills. That's fantastic. So there's like a huge trend now towards skill-based training, but we cannot ignore that education is still critical. People, if they don't know how to write and read, it's a big problem. Even if you give them the best cybersecurity training on earth and certification. So from my experience, I think we need to be very, very careful, and that's fair. Second trend is that people are scared of automation, but I think the product to market stage now, giving the artificial intelligence, machine learning, is way much more complex, that create tons of smaller, less complex tasks that allow young people to find jobs in terms of database, in terms of digital marketing. There's tons of subsectors that happening. So we don't have to really be over scared of automation. It is a problem, but there will be also a lot of work jobs to be created. So I think it's good to emphasize certification. The problem I see in that field also, the first point is it's monopolization. It's a big problem. I mean, in terms of cybersecurity and in terms of cloud computing, I mean, you just count the certification on your fingers. So young people actually driven to certain direction while they have a world open for them. So this is my two comments: the certificate based and the issue around automation. Thank you.
Hisham, and Rebecca, I'll pass that question to you as well. And then I see there's some popping up in the chat, so we'll definitely get to those soon.
Yeah, well, regarding the availability of positions regarding those skills, it really matches the market, because we are seeing this digital economy. I mentioned cybersecurity as a top concern, but it's also a concern of the network, for example, networking skills. And if we look at reports, and I don't have the reports right here, but I can share what is available regarding the positions available in networking, there is a gap. That means there are more jobs that people having the skills, the right skills to take those jobs. And that creates a problem for the country, for the companies, of course, but for the country as well. But it also provides an opportunity for students. So there is a gap of skills that is real across the world. Cybersecurity is one, networking is one. So there is an opportunity for students to develop, or for young people to develop those skills and really take those opportunities. The gap is real. I mentioned the 3.5 million gap in cybersecurity, and that gap for Latin America, for example, it's 700,000 jobs. So there is a possibility. for students, again, with the right skills to take those opportunities and to have relevant jobs, and not only to take those jobs, it's also to change their own mindset about their own professions. Just imagine a doctor or a lawyer getting
Oh, Rebecca, I think you're losing a bit of connection. Hopefully you can still hear us. Rebecca, can you hear us again? We lost you for a little bit. Are you still there?
Oh, sorry.
No
Yeah,
worries.
can you hear me?
Yes, you're back on. Thank you so much. Okay, well, we have a few questions, and maybe I'll start with Liz because she had her hand up first, and then I'll go to the questions in the chat. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if, I guess to jump onto your question, Jess, about the jobs that young people are interested in, the jobs that are being created. I feel like one thing that I have found of interest is Rebeca mentioned the data science curriculum that the Cisco Netacata is developing, and we're developing one as well. And what we found is that some of the skills that industry is being so clear about what's needed, for example, data science to monitor and make sense of the data that remote sensors are generating. When we started to figure out how to incorporate it into the standard school day, our education sector partners started talking about how critical those same data science skills were for citizenship, so that young people could make sense of the world around them. And it was really a higher order type of citizenship education than had previously been incorporated into the school day. And I guess my question for both Hisham and Rebeca is if they can speak a little bit to not only the technical skills, such as cybersecurity, programming, but also, and Hisham touched on this a lot, was those higher order thinking skills like identifying an opportunity, building a community, but also, you know, recognizing patterns, etc., and how they see those as cross-cutting or not across industries that are disrupted by how we're digitizing our economy.
Liz, Hisham, I saw you're on camera, so please go ahead, kick off.
This is very, very important, Liz. I really appreciate that, because I think the issue is to help the young generation to learn how to learn, because the amount of data and information and the change in the like technology sector and its implication on other sectors, from health, as we heard, to education. The challenge the change is very rapid, and we need young people who are capable to have a critical thinking, to be able to apply the learning quickly. And the issue is not really to have that certificate, because that certificate is not valid. So when I went in 2001, I did my computer engineering, and I go and I look at the foundation of what's going on with artificial intelligence or Python or machine learning. It's the foundation did not change. It's the binary mindset. So if we don't teach that, the foundation for our young people, either technical or soft skills, it's a problem. It's a short term, low bid, quick fix. So I think the knowledge economy we live in require technical skills, require also cognitive thinking skills and capability of how to acquire data and which data is relevant to what I'm trying to the problem I'm trying to solve, and how to apply the information. Is not the lack of information and data, It's how to apply it within certain contexts. That I see it a big problem. And in a computer engineering environment, I see the ratio between junior to senior is like 3 to 1. That's a problem because that supervisor has a lot of technical expertise, and you need the ratio to become 10 to 1. And until we get there, we don't create that massive number of youth who are capable to think and provide solution. Problem solver is not about only certificate. It's about problem solving. I see that lacking a lot when I talk to tech private sector in Silicon Valley or globally. The problem solving mindset, because again, technology is about problem solving. So if you don't have the foundation of how to think about a certain problem, analyze it, put the alternative, which return on investment, you don't have a problem solver. You have like a robots, and you don't need robots.
Thanks, Hisham.
Yeah,
Please
and
go
I
ahead.
would agree with that. And just to add on that, I would agree with that. But that is why it is very important to think about certain skills as horizontal to all degrees, not only to technology. Cybersecurity is essential to keeping us safe in the digital world for students, for seniors, for everyone, for all the citizens. But the same happens with data. So if we don't have those skills, if we don't provide those skills, regardless of the field of study, there will be a gap. So when they want to apply that, they will be without the tools needed to really harness the power of digital economy. So this is going to be, just as we learn sometimes Excel or Word, we need to learn about cybersecurity and data and these basic skills, everyone, not only people in technology.
Thank you both very much. We have a question from Juan Carlos Duran. Is there an experience on how technology can play a role for youth in rural areas where the tech job market is more constrained?
I can comment on that. Yes, technology is very important also in rural areas. We have some cases where the young people, sometimes when they learn these skills, they leave their communities. And we don't want that, because we know that a person with these skills can change their own community. They can enable technology to improve the lives in the community. So what we are encouraging is let's use these skills to help your own community with a problem in the community. We have a challenge. Every year we launch that challenge. That's the Global Problem Solver Challenge, and what we incentivize is the people in the community that use these skills to serve the community in a problem that it can be global, but it can be local as well. So technology plays a role, again, not only to get a job in a big company, but to solve a problem that is related to the community itself.
Yeah, Rebecca, thank you. Do you mind I just comment very quickly about the access, because the question is about rural young people, right? Is that correct? If I understood correctly, right? It's like, is the technology reaching young people in rural areas, right? Is that correct?
I think yes, that's correct. But also, how can it benefit probably rural areas where technology doesn't typically play a large role, or can play? Yeah. Well, actually, Juan Carlos, I don't know if you can go off mute, but would you like to clarify your question? I hope I'm not misinterpreting it. Okay, he said yes. So please go ahead.
It's interesting. When
thanks.
I was at the World Bank, there is like a group who are really looking at breakthrough innovation in technology, and most of what I learned from that group is really happening in Africa, believe it or not. And I learned that the supply chain application that the World Bank is looking at is really very fascinating. So the question here, for example, how to really link farmers in certain part of Africa with street vendors in a way that really save them time and efforts and create enhance productivity. That's very, very popular, and how the World Bank analysts look at it also from infrastructure. So if you really put all this money to build, of course you have to build infrastructure, but it takes time, it takes efforts. But sometimes using drones to deliver blood units by bringing some public-private partnership, which actually happening in Africa, by the way. A company from California called Zipline is doing that, and they are building a small airport for drones to deliver medical supplies. So the issue here is there are a lot of benefits for young people in rural areas from technology. The issue here is related to the shared technology in the farming industry. And that's where I see a lot of disruption might be happening, particularly in Africa, where tractors is needed for a certain time by certain farmer for certain crops. So that actually share economy using technology and in enhancing information and instant access to technology. I see that will really be a breakthrough in the agriculture, rural agriculture areas in Africa. And again, there are tons of models we can look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Hisham. Juan Carlos, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for both the speakers. And that was actually my question. I work for CRS, Catholic Relief Services, and we are figuring out ways in how we can engage youth to their local communities in rural areas, but also in the agriculture or value chain products. So yeah, I think the first speaker talked about one of our concerns is kind of building capacity, but then youth leaving the community. We don't want to do that. And we're looking at ways and how they can learn the skills and the technology to solve issues or support their farmers or their families that are small farmer holders to be more productive, to link to the market. So I think happy to hear about or share any model or example that you have been exposed in other regions. So thanks for answering.
Very much. I think that's our last question in the chat. Are there others who'd like to ask any questions? We still have about 15 minutes. Oh, Liz, please go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I noticed many questions in the chat about how to access Cisco's course catalog and what kind of supports they had available. And it seemed to me like this is sort of a larger question about how to partner with Cisco to access those courses in order to bring access to populations that might not otherwise know about them or have access to them. And I thought perhaps Rebeca could explain that to us briefly so that people can sort of figure out if that's something that they're interested in, next steps that they want to take.
Absolutely. Thank you for your question, Liz. Yes, we have basically we do this through partnerships. These are private public partnerships. But we also know that there are many out there that cannot receive education through an institution. So we have also a platform that addresses this need. And in both platforms, what we do is have this focus or approach on skills to job pathway. But it's not only skills to job, it's also digital literacy. So I can know and understand the basics of cybersecurity, of data, of how to get connected, no? Or I can follow a pathway. This is free, of course, of cost. The Skills for All platform is directed to all people that want to take this education, but we also partner with institutions and organizations to build the capacities. And I can give you an example. We partner with an educational institution and they use our courses, our platform. We have an LMS included so that we focus on the educator as well. So to help educators provide these cutting edge knowledge and skills, and we can do what institutions cannot do, that is update our curriculum constantly. We don't have to wait for a cycle to begin in a committee. We do it constantly because we align to certifications. This is not a certification program per se, it's a skill-based program, but we align to certification, and that forces us to be updated. So we partner with organizations, we build the capacity, we train instructors, we have a train the trainers program, we have an ecosystem. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to me. And we cover 180 countries or plus across the world, but we focus on building the capacity in the organizations, and we have the Skills for All platform that addresses the needs of individuals that don't have access to high cost education. And this is high quality. We have in different languages. English is the first one, but we have Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, other languages, no? And that's a way we contribute to the society through this program. I hope I answered your question, Elise.
Yes, thank you.
Rebecca. We have a question from Larry, but are we able to unmute him?
I think the answer is yes.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Larry. Please go ahead.
Thank you all very much for a really, really interesting session. I wanted to, for those people who were not able to join us yesterday, I wanted to put this conversation in the context of a larger conversation we're having in the community of practice. It's something that I'm now realizing we're remiss in not having dealt with sooner, but I'm glad we're at least finding our way there now. As I think about it with this new frame of reference, I now think it's impossible to think about scaling without thinking about technology. It's impossible to think about almost anything without thinking about technology, but particularly scaling. It not only changes what we scale up, it changes the way we scale things up. And yesterday we talked about examples from agriculture, health, and education. Today we're doing sort of a cross-cut, looking at those issues from the point of view of youth and employability, both from a jobs and from an entrepreneurial point of view. I think we're on a very important tack, and I really want to invite the people who are on the call today to stay with us as we pursue this in the weeks and months going forward. I am imagining that the youth working group may want to keep on this to some extent. I know the larger community of practice is going to stay on this issue for a while, and I think we're beginning to figure out what some of the key issues are that we can interrogate and where examples will really begin to help people. I got a couple of new ones today that I absolutely did not know about before that I think are right in the middle of the questions we should be asking ourselves. Because if we try to answer digital age questions with analog age answers, we're going to be wide of the mark on this. And so it's clear to me now, whether we're talking about trying to scale a health outcome or an employment outcome, there's simply no good way forward without thinking our way through this set of issues. And that not only has implications for youth employment, youth as the next generation have implications for each and every one of those solutions. And so figuring out what we need to do as a community to position for that, I think, is of the highest possible priority. I guess that's more a statement than a question, but I'd be interested in what Rebeca, Hisham, and you yourself, Jess, think about that and how we can best move forward with it.
Larry, this is very, very important. I think if you allow me just to comment, I think that also the question is not how does technology create successful innovation. That's half of the equation. How does technology help create innovative solution at scale is the full statement. Scale is need to be in the core of the discussion if we as community of practice want to explore that. Why? Because you always bring to the discussion the issue of complexity. If for any model to be scaled, we need to subtract, not add. And maybe technology can help in that, how to deliver youth employment program at scale with less complexity. That's the first question. The second question, if we want to talk about nuances of how to apply technology and how does that technology impact scale, is a technology created like a counterintuitive approach to supply and demand. Usually, if you have more products, that the price goes down, except in technology. If you have more members in a platform, the price goes up. So the cost per participant in the model we're talking about using technology platform to deliver youth employment is unique because of the two issues. The first is capability to deliver innovation at scales with all this complexity, because make it mainstreaming. Second, the cost per participant is becoming much more reasonable. And of course, we need the evidence to support both, to examine both. And that could be a research, that could be, I don't know, but I think these are the questions that I myself struggle with, Larry. Thank you so much.
Rebecca, did you want to respond?
I just wanted to comment on this very interesting comment on we need technology to scale and technology education, And I do think that educational institutions are more open to partner with technology vendors. We are in a point where vendors are more interested in contributing to society through this kind of content than only selling products. And again, this should be in the interest of everyone. So this is an excellent time to partner, because there is a need, but there is also the interest to contribute. And that's why we have to offer different opportunities. We have to offer education through organizations, but also to use technology to reach the learner where the learner is. And that's why the technology platform that we offer, for example, is good for. So we have to leverage that and to take advantage of that, and to create this mindset in the learner of long life learner, because that is what can provide sustainability in the future. It's not only attending a course, it's creating this mindset of learning all the time that will provide the sustainability in the future.
Thank you, Rebecca and Hisham. Larry, I do have thoughts, but I know we only have about 5 or 6 minutes left, and we have one more person with a question. So let me pass it over to Femi. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, to close us out with the final question. And hopefully, as the community continues to organize more events, especially on this really important topic, you all will continue to join us for those and have these fantastic conversations. So Femi, I will pass it to you. I hope you're able to unmute and ask your question. If you're not able to unmute, perhaps you can just type it in the chat and we can have Rebecca or Hisham respond. Okay, do you mind typing your question in the chat? Apologies for that. Thank you. I think we'll just give Femi a minute to type to her question. And I guess while we're waiting for the question, Larry, just to respond to, your observation, I do think that's right. When thinking about scale, technology is a tool to help scale, but I also think it's not the only answer. And I think especially for youth, it's so ingrained in their lives now. My little sister was born with social media and things like that. So we also have to look at the impact of technology on issues like youth employment, but even more broadly beyond that, how is it impacting people in general? I mean, with social media, depression has increased significantly among youth. There's other considerations. So I think, as a tool, it's fantastic, but there's also some consequences that come with such large use of technology. Digital authoritarianism is increasing across the world with greater use of technology by governments, different tools that they're able to use to, censor things, track things, spy, police, things like that. So it's a double-edged sword, I think, and we're going to have to be very careful of how it's used. But especially, Rebecca, you were talking about cybersecurity. That's critical to ensuring those kinds of things. Okay, we have our question from Femi. Technologies are disruptive. How do you curb the evolving threat of young people involved in crime? And how can this large pool be re-engineered mindset to innovate successfully for their communities? Hope I'm interpreting that correctly. So maybe how can technology support youth who are dealing with crime in their communities? How can it be used?
I think it was not that. I think it's that it can be used for good or for bad. How do you try to emphasize the good and de-emphasize or blunt the bad?
Yeah, I mean, I really just very quick comment, like 30 seconds. I think technology, what's lacking is regulating that monster called social media or tech. I mean, as I said, I hear a lot from young people that the government is so behind. We don't want to over-regulate, but no regulation is a big problem. It's like if you don't have like signs in the streets, car could be dangerous if somebody drive the car while they are under the influence of a drink. So car is a tool and solve a lot of problems like medicine. And I think technology and social media is something here to exist. I have 10 years old and I'm struggling with my ex-wife on how to monitor the screen time. It's the 21st century problems for parents, not my only problem. So we cannot resist that. We need to control it and monitor it and deal with it in a way that makes sense and create value to the society. But to block it and say it's not there, it's like elephant in the room.
Thanks, Hisham. Rebecca, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I think that maybe I want to be sure I interpret this question, I understood this question correctly, but it is important for all of us to educate ourselves first in the digital world. And the other important part is content. It's not only about the technology itself, it's about the content and how we educate our young people to read the content and to go through the content, and this ethical point of view that sometimes there's so much information out there, or this not reliable information, that it's difficult for a young person to understand which is the right one. So we have to continue with focusing in content, focusing in ethical education. And I think that this is going to be quite important, because if we don't educate ourselves in the use of technology as well, we will be exposed to, as you said, people get people get skills that enable them to do crime. So without the ethical part, we are educating people that make crime, and we don't want that. But in the same sense, if we educate citizens to protect themselves from crime, we will be attacking two things at the same time. In Nigeria, yes, we have, just to answer that question in the chat, we have the program. We don't have centers directly, but yes, we have partners that work in Nigeria, and we are partners with the government as well to educate high school students and technical students in this, to provide this education to these students as well. Yes, we do have a program in Nigeria, and it's growing fast.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. I know it's very similar in Jamaica as well. And Femi, I think part of this too is just economic opportunity, where oftentimes, there aren't a lot of employment opportunities where youth and their families can make a living. So I think we're seeing a lot of these cons happen across the world, especially in Nigeria and Jamaica. Great. Well, thank you all so much. We are at time. I want to thank you all for joining on behalf of the Youth Employment Working Group, again, co-chaired by myself, Hisham, and Liz Vance, and also huge thanks to Larry, Johannes, Gabby, Natalie, and Adam for helping set this up and helping out with all the technology issues. And of course, our speakers, Rebecca and Hisham as well. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.